am the general manager for our Yadpa bookstore here in Belize City. At our bookstore, we cater at offering books that can help you live a healthier lifestyle. We offer books that can help your marriage and your family life to be even more sweeter. We haven't forgotten the kids, we have books for them, and we also have books that will help you grow in your spiritual life. We're located inside the headquarters of the Belize Union of Seventh-day Adventists that is located on 3A Street, Kings Park. Our phone numbers are 223-3048, or you can get us on our cell number at 660-2378. Our working hours are from 8 to 12:15 from Monday to Thursday, 1 to 4:15, and on Friday we're open from 8 to 12. You can also find us on Facebook. Our name for our page is Yadpa Belize. ATN has partnered with us, and for every purchase made using the code ATN21, a proceed will be going to them to help them further in their ministry as well. So feel free, come visit us. I'm sure you're going to find something that will be a blessing to you all. Thank you.
My name is Bob Roberts, and my job is mission pilot.
Bob Roberts lives and works in Papua, Indonesia. He's been flying with Adventist Aviation Services in Indonesia for more than 20 years. He's seen all kinds of things and met thousands of people hungry to learn about Jesus. On a typical morning, Bob gets up, checks to make sure everything is okay with the plane, and climbs in for a ride. He delivers supplies, visits villages, and transports people throughout the many islands of this region. If you look on the map, you'll see that the island is split in half. The eastern side is the country of Papua New Guinea, while the western half is part of Indonesia. Here in Papua, there are huge mission challenges. The first obstacle is getting to the people. The terrain here is extremely rough. Mountains, rivers, and dense jungle make it nearly impossible to walk through. To reach some of these villages by foot, it can take weeks of hiking and chopping through this terrain. That's where Adventist Aviation Services comes to the rescue. Trips that used to take weeks now take hours, thanks to Bob's flying. These islands contain more than 500 language groups. You can imagine how difficult it is to reach so many languages in an area made up of hundreds of islands. Almost 90% of these people have never even heard the gospel. Bob flies to reach the unreached. He has been flying for the Seventh-day Adventist Church for almost 40 years now. He spent a number of years flying in Africa before coming to Indonesia. His experience in the air is extremely valuable to the mission work in Indonesia. This is where he feels at home and where God has called him to fly. When visiting this small city in West Papua, Bob discovered that the local Adventist pastor's father was very sick and had no way to see him. If he took a boat to visit his father, it could take days. The pastor was very disappointed that he may never see his father again. Bob offered to fly him to the nearby city to visit his father. With the services of the Adventist Aviation plane, the pastor was able to see his father again and share encouraging words with him. Bob often transports sick people to get medical attention. Many of the small cities and villages have no medical facilities. Commercial planes rarely or never fly some places. Even with small commercial planes, it is very expensive for a villager to afford a ticket.
We fly a lot of sick people, and when we do fly sick people, we fly them for free if they're really sick.
Bob's flying is a ministry. He cares about the people he visits. He wants to bring the message and hope of Jesus to the people of Indonesia.
So those are the kind of things that make you glad you're a mission pilot, helping people that would not have a hope otherwise. And that's why we're here.
Please pray for Bob as he continues to fly for Jesus. Pray for the hundreds of workers around the world who've left the comforts of home to serve. Thank you for supporting the mission of the Seventh-day Adventist Church.
All my life, I've been dealing with projects. I do a lot of research. Basically try to understand how different materials affect fires. It involves a lot of formulas and gathering data. I met this girl once in grad school, and we got to talk about all kinds of things, and also about God. It was great. I could share with her what I believed in. And then I got busy with my own research and realized I may have treated her like a project. Like, I kind of expected her to change herself. But people are so much more than projects. There's some kind of human connection to it. I think we're supposed to share our lives with those around us, but sometimes just being with them, being their friend, that's the best way to find true connection. And that's what witnessing is to me, relationships and friendships.
Putting God first can be difficult. What can we learn from Esther that will help us put God first in our lives today? When Esther joined the selection process that would eventually make her queen of the Persian Empire, many doubts must have rushed through her mind. Her people were exiles, and their hopes were dim. It looked like God had abandoned them to Persian rule while still requiring obedience. But Esther was beautiful, both inside and out. Even a ruthless king could see that. So, Xerxes chose her to become his queen. Esther enjoyed her palace and privileges she could only have imagined in previous years. After a while, King Xerxes was deceived by an advisor when he issued a death decree against all Hebrews. When challenged to beg the king for mercy, Esther was afraid. It's difficult to put God first when we struggle with poverty and the lack of resources. Yet, wealth and power often also lead people away from him. How do you put God first when you have more wealth and influence than those around you? Well, follow the example of Esther. She said, "Go, gather all the Jews, and fast for me for 3 days. My maids and I will fast likewise. And so I will go to the king, which is against the law, and if I perish, I perish." Esther was not immune to fear, but she was as courageous as she was beautiful. She bravely decided to put God first, investing all, even her life if necessary, to save others. Her words, "If I perish, I perish," are engraved in the story of God's people to encourage those who, through the ages, would also be called to do the same. And we know how the story ended. Esther put God first. Her example compels us to do the same. As the deacons collect the tithe and promise, we are challenged to put God first.
We're fine. It's been crazy lately, though. Last week, this tornado just crashed through my entire neighborhood. Everything went dark. We had, no electricity, nothing. All of my classes are online, and that's why it's really difficult to keep up with everything. But I think God calls me in the midst of all of this chaos and noise and, I don't know, everything. But he doesn't compete for just my attention. He competes for my heart. That's why I need to spend time with him in the quiet. And it's so interesting to me that even though I'm with him in just those quiet moments, experiencing him is not quiet. It's so much more, much greater and fulfilling. And that's the fascinating thing. His power is not just bound to those quiet moments, but they give me the trust and strength that I need every day.
Dive into our topic for today, Miss Aislinn. It has been often said that kids do not experience grief and loss. They said, when they lose a loved one, they said, well, they're too young to understand what's going on. So they don't really understand. And so they're not really experiencing grief and loss as opposed to how an adult would. I know we're going to find out today that is not necessarily the case, right? So just to give our viewers who are joining us for today a little overview of what these two terms mean. Maybe we share the definition of both, and then maybe you can go on to explain how grief and loss affects a child.
Okay. So grief is the natural emotional response that a person would get when they lose someone. So losing is, the act, the death. And so it doesn't necessarily has to be a family member or a friend. It could be a coach, it could be a mentor, it could be a teacher, someone that was dear to that person. And it doesn't grief grief and loss doesn't necessarily have to be in the sense of death. It could be in something that was there has been broken away, like for example a relationship. It could be a child going into a different class grade. It could be uh losing a pet. It could be something other. I mean, it has a wide feeling, you know. So it doesn't have to be specifically to death, but something that they had they lost it. It's not there anymore. It has been removed from their lives, and some of these reaction would be for a child to act out, a child to you find in teens that sometimes they would cut themselves because they would experience such great pain, and they wanted to move the pain from being so grievous into their self, so they would transfer it to somewhere else. They could be finding themselves in wrong relationships. Children would be showing these temper tantrums, and they would start doing poorly in school. So these are some of the signs that you see when a child has experienced a loss, and they're grieving something that has been taken away from them.
Right. And I like how you mentioned something there, that grief and loss does not necessarily have to be losing the death of someone.
Right.
I remember a couple of months ago, my daughter had this pet dog, and she was very close. Actually, or we love dog. We're
Right.
a family that loves dog. But she was really close to this dog, and it was like more than just a dog to her. And I remember when sadly it got knocked down, and when my husband came to tell me, sorry, the night, he knew that it would have been a big deal for her. So instead of just saying it aloud, I had just put her to bed. I was actually still there praying with her. We had just finished praying.
Right.
And he ran in and he told me in my ears, they just knocked down the dog. I think it's not going to make it. And so I rushed out. She said, "Mom, what's happening?" She's very smart. Commotion. She already
Right.
knows something's wrong. And so I thought, no, it's okay. Just, go to bed. And I went outside with my husband, and, we said we wanted to rush the dog and everything. And she came out and she saw the dog, and she was, she didn't scream. She didn't have any big outburst, but she's like, "Mom, is it bad? Is she going to die?" And then I said, "No, Mama, we're going to try to save her." So me and my husband took her to the animal hospital, and she went with my parents, and unfortunately the dog didn't make it. But the following morning when she woke up, the hardest thing as a parent to do is to I would say,
Right.
break the news to them, because it's gonna affect them. But telling them, I wasn't sure how to do that. Me and my husband, we were kind of broken up about the situation. And so I said, well, I ain't gonna lie and say the dog went to heaven or anything
Right,
like that.
right.
So I just came out and I told her, well, last night you saw what happened. Unfortunately, they weren't able to save her, and she's gone. And when I said she's gone, she started to cry, but not hysterically, but she just started to cry and cry, and she keep questioning. I said, "Mom, I don't understand why." So I said, "Okay, she cried, get it over with, bomb, it's okay." So I was getting ready to send her to her babysitter. And she's like, "Mom, I don't want to go." I tried giving her breakfast. She don't want to eat. She just stayed she sat beside the doghouse, and she did not want to move. And she was like gloomy, and everybody who know my child, she's not a gloomy person.
Right.
And so I told my husband, I said, I'm kind of worried about her. How long is this going to last? Is she really feeling it to that extent? And he was like,
Yeah.
yes, Dinah, she's really close. So that day I remembered she went watch TV, and she had certain spells where she just cried for no reason. Like I would be in the kitchen and I turn around, she's crying, and I'm like, why are you crying? Like she remembers her, like just spontaneously. And that happened for like a week. And couple weeks ago, she started this new thing on her own. She picked flowers from my mom's garden, and she goes to where the dog is buried at the back of the yard, and she goes and she put the flower, and she said, I miss you, but I'm gonna be okay. And she talks, and one day I caught her doing it, and I was like, why are you doing that? I said, do you know she's not gonna come back, right? She said, I know, grandma already explained to me. Said, but that's what I want to do. That's how it makes me feel better. And so that whole experience with Aislinn was kind of a new experience for me as a parent, because I never thought that they, uh, how you would say, like, I thought it was a pet. She would cry a day, she would get over it, and like, kids forget and move on. But like, to this day, if you ask her, if she sees picture, she still remembers, and she had that, I would say, process of grieving. And I think as parents, it's very important for us to allow them.
Right.
Even, don't say, oh, girl, move on, or stop acting like that. It's just a dog. We tend to do that.
We tend to do that because it wasn't significant. Maybe that might not be significant to the adult, but it was significant to the child, especially if you went and got the dog, the dog from the dog, and the dog,
a puppy.
The child saw the dog growing up, so they grew an attachment, and it doesn't. And it when I was doing some research, it shows that the bond is different because of the extent amount of time. So sometimes the person might have been with the thing for 2 weeks or more, but it doesn't erase the idea that the child had grew a bond with that object or that thing or that person, despite the length of time. So she had that. She'd been seeing this dog from she was small, so she had that bond to this dog, and I guess she would feed the dog, and she would play with the dog, and she would walk the dog, and even want to help you as you're giving the dog a bath. So these are all things that create a bond, because when you do that with your child, you're creating a bond as well. And so the child was doing that to the dog, so they were creating a bond, and a bond that is a lifelong bond. So it might not be significant to you, but it was very much significant to the child.
And also, before you move on there, Miss Aislinn, you said something I think, very important. You said that we already established it doesn't have to be loss of a person, it can also be loss of a thing. But you also said it doesn't have to be dead. It could be, losing something, or something changing,
right,
or something removed out of your life. And that whole experience with my daughter, she said something to me which I never thought about it like that. She's an only child, right?
Okay.
And for me, as a parent, I thought as an only child, well, they should be happy because, everything is for them, everything they get, you got the mom and the dad loving up on you, and you don't have to share that love. Right. I came from a family of 3. My older brother, I'm the only girl, I had 2 older brothers, and they would always tell me, oh, you get all the love because 1 you're the baby and 2 you're the only girl. So with Lana now, I said, well, she shouldn't feel that way because it's only her. And when the dog died, she was like, no, I will feel just lonely all over again. Just me by myself. Always just me. I have no company. And I told my husband, I said, I didn't know she felt that way. I mean, I always thought she was happy to be the only one. So that really sparked something for me that, a lot of the time these kids go through so many emotions and we overlook it as parents.
And you had mentioned something you didn't understand how to talk to her. And one of my points that I have here in how to deal with a child that lost someone or something is to talk to them in their language, because sometimes we like to use these euphemism and say it's no longer there, and we tend to we stray away from the topic, and then the child does not understand what you're telling them. You have to be able to, because they might not fully get it at that point in time, but they will eventually understand what's going on, especially after a period of time of not seeing that thing or that person. And so what we, especially for people that, for a child, for a baby, what you want to do is to get rid of that goo goo gaga talk. Sometimes we want to be able to make it soft and nice and pretty for them. No, a child understand. Listen, the mommy or daddy or granny or grandpa, whoever it is, their body stop working and they're not going to be here anymore. They are, and you explain to them, we have to put them in the ground and we will not see them again. They're not going to heaven because that's not what we believe. But one day when Jesus come, he will raise them. He will raise them up and they would, their body will start connecting back again. So you have to be able to give the child, you have to, just like how you would speak to your husband and tell your husband, have these conversations, you want to be able to have these same conversation with the child, because they understand as much as you think that they don't. They understand. They're going to school. You put 5 times 5 in front of them for the first time. They won't understand at the first time. But as you gradually teach them the process and the concept of how to times those things together, they are going to get it. And so we need to get rid of that. And then listening to them and comfort them. And so, because when you listen to them, like how you were listening to your child as she was talking, you need to you comfort them. You allow them to know that, okay, I'm a part of this too with you. I'm going through this with you. And so you're not here alone. And what happened when somebody go into debt, when a child loses somebody, the first thing the parents would do, yes, they are grieving, so they don't understand how to extend the information or the same love to the child, because they're grieving and they withdraw. I mean, you withdraw because of the pain that you're going through. And so they leave the child alone and they basically to go through the process by themselves. And that is detrimental for them in the later run, because statistics shows that child that experience profound loss in childhood is very devastating. And so when they're it says that they're 5 times more likely to develop some type of psychiatric disorder. And so you don't want to be able to allow that for your child, because you want them to be in their sane mind. You want your child to grow up having a normal life. I mean, well, what society classify as norm. You want them to be in their right mind. You don't want them to be able to be running on the streets and be begging others and going through that process there.
Yes, indeed. And if I can put a pin there, Miss Aislinn, I think for parents that are watching, what she's mentioning right now is very important, because if you can recall, we did a segment on mental health. And one of the things that the psychologist has shared with us is that he said, remember, as parents, we need to do our part. Yes, indeed, we go through our own emotional trauma. And, we have the need and also to heal from whatever trauma that we have done. But we have to understand that as adults, we have a coping mechanism that we can fall back on to get us through. But imagine a child being so young, their coping mechanism is not there yet. They don't have that to fall back on like what we do. What they have to fall back on is us. So us stepping up, as you mentioned, and being there through the process where they don't have to go through it alone is a stepping stone into helping your child to have a well-rounded mental health.
Right. And this is what I would call grieving good. I mean, there's no good way of grieving, because grieving it is a lot of burden. It hurts. It really hurts, and it hurts you to the core, especially when you lose someone to death. And so what you want to do is to be able to take the children through this process. For example, if the child used to have a routine, you allow them to go through that routine every day. I mean, sometimes their action may be intermittent, where the child would be like they're laughing, and so you say, oh, they're good. They're not good. Sometimes they would be laughing because that's the nature of a child. They would laugh, and then one spell you will see them withdraw and go into a corner, because that's when they're feeling the sadness now, because sometimes they remember, they sit there and they could be playing, and then they remember, oh yes, someone died for me, or I don't see daddy anymore, I don't see mommy anymore, I don't see this person anymore. And so you have to always remember to have the child involved. And then when it comes to debt, you want to be able to give them a task. Say a task for the funeral, for them to give out pamphlets. The program. You want them to feel like they are a part of that debt, because it happened to them as well, as much as it happened to the person, the adult. And so you want to be able to allow them to know, and then you reassure them that I understand it hurts, and I know it's going to hurt for a long period of time. I can't guarantee you that it's going to stop tomorrow, but allow the child to be a part of the grieving process so that they can grieve good, like I would put it.
Yes, and so these are some of the things that we're talking about as it relates to grief when it comes to children.
Right.
Now, just as with adults, no child grieves the same.
Right.
And we have to be very mindful of that, to our viewers at home, that maybe your child screams and don't want to do the normal routine, as what you said, and they just seem difficult and you can't seem to get them to be their normal self again. That's the way how they can be, dealing with their grief. Some of them are withdrawn. Some of them, they have so many aspects in which they can purge through their grief. But I think what's important here, as parents, as teachers, as mentors, is our facilitation to that process.
Right.
And that's what I want to come to next, Miss Aislinn. What are some of the things that we can do in order to help them, as you mentioned, grieve good?
Right. So you want to be able to hug them. Hug. Simple touch. Because when you're crying, wouldn't you like a hug?
Yes.
Would you like to be embraced?
Embraced.
Okay, so hug the child. Allow the child to know that you're there. You're hurting too. Allow them to be able to form words, put words to their tears. Okay, baby, what's going on? Tell me what's hurting. Where does it hurt? Mommy hurts in my heart. Okay, what is happening in your heart? So that they be able to put words to their tears instead of just crying. Allow them to so that they can go through the process a little bit more not easy, but a little bit more at ease. Knowing that, okay, I can talk this out and I can trust mommy, I could trust daddy, I could trust this person.
Someone to
Right.
share it with.
And so you want to be able to allow that to happen, and then tell the child what they should expect throughout the process of grieving. Allow them to give them a what they can handle. If it's 3 things that you want to work on for the month, okay, sweetheart, we're going to work on this. This is what we're going to happen. This is what's going to happen. And so you allow them to help them to channel their emotions into doing things. Like if you want them to allow them to express themselves with arts and crafts. I mean, we're talking about children. So arts and crafts, sometimes they can be very creative in expressing their tears on a piece of paper with some paint. Allow them to do something that they would like, maybe music. Maybe they would want to express themselves through music. Maybe that's what they're good at, so they will be able to put down some words, and you're going to see them start writing their own songs. If you would leave them, write them poems. Well, of course, these are for the older ones, but for the younger ones, hands-on stuff would work. And start putting them in the kitchen with you guys to cook and do other things, just so that they can be able to channel their emotions in another route, so that they don't not hurt so much, but to be able to go through the process just like you are.
And I like that, because when you lose something, you have an emptiness,
right,
and a void. And one of the best things to do, of course, it takes time, but one of the best things to do is to fill that gap.
Mm-hmm.
And as you're talking there, I'm reflecting on the situation with my daughter, and I remember whenever she used to come home, she would leave every morning with her dad and come back, because the sitter is close to where he works. And whenever they come home, that's the first thing the dog used to go to the sitter with her. So they go together as a family, they come back as a family. So that was one of the most challenging time for both her and my husband, not having the dog. And it was such a I would say experience for them because the dog did not like the car ride. So every time it's time to put the dog in the vehicle, she would hide. So that's what a normal routine in the morning, find the dog, who finds the dog and puts her in the car. And so coming back, the dog was excited to always come home. So she would be the first one jumping out of the vehicle. So whenever she came home in the evening, that's one of the sad parts. She said, Mom, no Rosie. And, you know, as she reached home, like she had no, how I would say, happiness in going in the house. Is, you know, she would walk herself in, like, not like before. Right. And so I started to notice that. And I told my husband, I said, well, we have to start filling the gap. She already mentioned it's back to her being lonely. So what we start doing is all the moments in which she and the dog would be, we try like putting things in those parties. So when my husband come, he would try not to come like too late, come earlier. So okay, when you reach home, he quickly does something with her. They would do this together. And so little by little, she start I would not say forget. She still remember up to now, but little by little, you would see her attitude towards these different moments in which she was already used to being with the dog. She started to adapt, and I think what you mentioned there is key because we have to pay attention to these things. Right. They're little small things, but when we pay attention to them and we show the kids that we see there that they're hurting and we want to be there for them, I think it helps that child to be able to maneuver herself through it much better. So we're going to wind down here and we'll shortly go into a break for our first section here. But before we do that, I had mentioned earlier in your biography that you taught for 7 years and you did both preschool and primary school. So since we're talking about grief and loss, just wanted to ask if there was any instance during that time there that you've, as a teacher, we're talking here, you're talking as a life coach and based on your field, but let's talk as a teacher. Were there any instances in which you had to be the, I won't say the parent, but be the person there to channel the process of grief and loss to a student?
Well, I could remember there's lots. There's, as a teacher, you experience these things every day because each child come from different walks of life.
Right.
And they go through their own different situation each day. But I could remember this specific time in preschool where this one child had saw altercation between two of the men in her life, you know, her dad and probably somebody else that was coming along the way in that same light to her. And she was about, this was preschool, so she was about 4 years old, and she saw that happening and came to school. And before school started and we start doing story time and get in that circle, they would do that free play for that first 30 minutes. And so she was there and she was in the little house in the back that I had in the back of the classroom. And I was watching as they all play. And the one that caught my attention was this little girl that was inside the house, because she was, as other children were coming into the little house, like she would push them away first. And then I guess one little boy managed to escape and got into the little home. And she took one of the play tools that was in there, and she started basically stabbing the other child.
Wow.
And so I took that situation to the principal because that was not for me as a teacher to deal with. And so I took that up to her. I don't know what happened up there, but when the child came back down, she burst out into the recapping the story from the night before that took place. And I was like, that was, I don't want to say that was what sealed the deal, but that was when I realized, okay, I really love dealing with children. They don't speak much, but they act out. They act out what they see. They mimic what they saw. They do things based on what they were taught. And so when I saw her doing that, I said, okay, I really love dealing with children, and I love psychology in understanding how all of this happened, all of this took place. And at the time, I was still in school and I was going through child development. And so I was in the class child development. So as I saw that, I understand what was going on, but I could not use my teaching from the classroom to just say, okay, come let me intervene in that situation. But that was the situation that sealed the deal for me, that this was really the field that I wanted to venture out into.
Yes, and I like that you mentioned that, Miss Aislinn, because I was teaching, I think, about for 3.5 years, and as you mentioned there, sometimes you want to intervene, you get that feeling because kids come to you with all sorts of things.
Yes, they do.
Sometimes it breaks your heart because you wish that you could fix it. You wish, but based, as you mentioned, based on what we are required and limited to as teachers, we cannot intervene, we cannot interfere in personal issues. Yes, of course, we can report, as you did with the principal, report and make recommendations, but we cannot directly get involved. And sometimes those kids, they're yearning for just someone to listen to them, just someone to care. And as you're talking about that situation, I am pretty sure that hopefully she didn't lose any of the person that was in that altercation, but I know she was grieving that situation in itself, and she probably didn't know how to come to school and tell a teacher, but it was so much on her mind that she just acted out. And that's what we're discussing this morning, that there are different ways in which kids portray what they're feeling, the grief, the loss. And so we need to be aware of these elements, these behaviors, and try to address it in how we can.
Just to stick a little pin right there, sometimes they are taught how to react as well.
Right.
They are taught how to react. So
that is very true.
Maybe the child saw that there was an argument, so when she was in the house, she had an argument with the child, so she acted out the same way she saw that argument ended up, and so she was doing it. So sometimes the children are taught how to act. So when a parent is grieving and they're grieving in this light, in this way, the child sometimes pick up that same reaction and then portray it later on in their lives, because that was the mirror that they were looking into.
Yes, indeed. And such a beautiful talk here. Hope that you're enjoying it just as I am having this conversation with Miss Murillo. We're going to take a break now, but when we come back, we are going to have her share her personal experience of what it was like for her losing her brother to gun violence, and also what she's doing to remember her brother and the life that he lived. So if you want to hear that, you need to stick around. We're going to go and take that break now.
A study published in the Journal of the American Dietetic Association found that toddlers aged 12 months and older consumed a third of their daily calories from snacking between meals, with the snacks becoming less nutritious as the children got older. Dietary patterns low in fruits and veggies and high in sweets and saturated fats began to develop between the ages of 12 months and 24 months, and this pattern tended to be established by 24 months. That's a fact. But there's hope. Parents can establish the foundation for a healthy diet early in life when eating habits and preferences are being formed. Simple dietary changes, such as offering more nutritious snacks, can help prevent obesity and chronic disease in our children. So switch the gummy bear for blueberries and see them growing healthier and happier.
Putting God first can be difficult. What can we learn from Daniel that will help us put God first in our lives today? Daniel was a young man when he was taken into captivity to Babylon, capital of the greatest empire the world had ever seen. King Nebuchadnezzar always took the best and brightest young men as captives from the many nations he conquered. He would then teach them the Babylonian science and religion, knowing that they would significantly contribute to the expansion of his kingdom. 10,000 young people were taken along with Daniel, and from them, the best of the best were sent to the palace. Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were some of these. Their first test was with food. In fact, since the time of Eden, God's people have been tested with food. Food has been a representation of either devotion to God or rejection of His word. But in their case, putting God first could have cost them all the privileges afforded them, or worse, they could lose their lives. However, these young men decided to put God first, no matter what happened. They couldn't be forced or bribed to do otherwise. Faithfulness with their diets not only gave them superior physical strength, but, most importantly, greater mental and spiritual discernment. So, it was not by chance that they became the top students in the Babylon University. Later, Daniel would be put in charge of all other scientists, while his 3 friends would eventually become the top leaders of Babylon's capital city. All this because they decided to put God first. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were willing to be burnt alive rather than compromise. They said, "If we are thrown into the blazing furnace, the God we serve is able to deliver us from it, and He will deliver us. But even if He does not, we want you to know, Your Majesty, we will not serve your gods or worship the image of gold you have set up." As an older man, Daniel would rather be thrown into a den of lions than to stop praying first thing in the morning. But God came through again, and Daniel lived to praise Him and become the prime minister of Babylon. Daniel put God first. His example compels us to do the same. As the deacons collect the tithe and promise, we are challenged to put God first.
This is not a time for panic. It is a time for calm, for a steady trust in the Lord we love and serve, and also to focus on how we best can serve, how we can move forward together in this interesting and very challenging time. I've not seen a time like this. I'm reminded that we really have nothing to fear for the future except we forget how God has led us in the past and His teachings. So in this time we have an opportunity to bear witness to the faith that is within us, reflecting hope, demonstrating stability through the assurance that God will never leave us nor forsake us. But having the knowledge that He will be with us, unmistakable clearness and power that is His may be revealed in our own lives day by day. And that way we can not only make a difference, we can be the difference. May God bless you as by His grace and with His help, we together negotiate this challenging, difficult, and interesting time. But this too will pass by His grace.
Are you taking heart medicines? Medications can give us a false sense of security. Even if a person takes heart medicines, eating a lot of saturated or trans fats, fast and junk foods, red and processed meats, sweets, and processed foods will still increase inflammation and make cardiovascular disease worse. That's a fact. But there's hope. A study of more than 31,000 adults found that you can substantially reduce cardiovascular recurrence beyond drug therapy alone by eating a diet rich in vegetables, fruits, and fish, and low in meats. A heart-healthy diet reduced their risk of dying from cardiovascular disease by 35%, a new heart attack by 14%, heart failure by 28%, and stroke by 19%. So eat your veggies! A healthy heart starts with a healthy meal.
Welcome back. This is Defining Your Health, and today's topic we've been talking about grief and loss in children, and we've been sharing here with Miss Murillo. She has been talking to us of grief and loss, how children experiences it, what are some of the signs that we can see that they are going through this process, and how we can be good help in terms of facilitating this process for them. Now, for a second half, she's going to get a little bit more personal in talking about grief and loss and what she had to experience as, I would say, a teenager. Um, Sister Aislinn and I, we grew up childhood friends, and her brother, she has two brothers, and her brothers were very close friends with my two brothers. We all grew up in a singing group. We had a singing group at that time, a bunch of us from the church, engaging in singing, and it was a very fun and filled time. We also went to the same high school, her brother, and her brother name is Teddy Morillo. Almost everyone that I can think of in my head right now knows Teddy, right? Teddy was a very known, popular, famous, as you may call it, person at our high school and also at church. He was funny, he was amicable, he was kind, caring, and just had one of the best personalities in a person, honestly. And I can always, as we were sitting before coming on set, I told her, man, I can still remember some of the fun stuff that he used to do, and always had us laughing, right? But unfortunately, we lost Teddy in 2010, and one of the most devastating ways to we lost him to gun violence. And she's going to be I think this is her first time actually sharing what this process, this losing her brother, was like for her and her family. This is the first time being caught on camera, and I think we want to thank her for being willing to share this experience with us. But before I have her speak, it was a devastating time because in 2010, you see how you hear gun violence being so predominant. Now it's just like something that happened every other day. Back in 2010, when we were going to high school, it was not the same. It wasn't as known as now, and worse for gun violence to happen to a young Adventist youth that was not part of a gang. It was a big shock for us, and I was telling Miss Aislinn that I remember the Saturday we were going to church, and right before we left to go to church, we remember getting a call. And when that news came to us through that phone call, I mean, like everything just stopped. I mean, I can relive that moment. It was a shock, and we were just friends. Imagine what it was like for her losing that person you see every morning when you wake up, and that brother that was always the fun person in the family. It was really hard for them. So she's going to share her experience, how she was able to channel herself through these different stages of grief, and what the journey has been like from 2010 until now, which I think has been over a little bit, 11 years, right? So go ahead, Ms. Aislinn.
Well, I know first we were talking about grieving childhood, grief and loss in childhood. From my expertise, it's not that I'm an expert in the topic, but the process that I went through with my own brother was what made, not so much of an expert, but made me understand a little bit more of the topic. And so growing up with Ted he was the life of the party. He was the life of the party. He would have you laughing until your belly bottom was in pain, because that was the person he was. He enjoyed playing basketball, and he enjoyed doing adventurous stuff. Anything that he had to take a risk for, he enjoyed doing it with all his heart. I could remember him, his hair, how those curls were always proper in the back. And because going to Canaan, his shirt was white, so he didn't want his hair, the grease from his hair, to touch the shirt color, and so he would be riding on his bicycle to school in a stiff way, so that that doesn't contaminate the white on his, on his shirt. But Ted was always put together, and he go to church. He was a deacon at our church in Mount Zion. Um, he 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 was just a character all by himself. I mean, there was none like him. But during that process, when we lost him, I could remember I was sitting in my grandmother's chair. I was flat ironing my hair to go to church the morning, and so I got up early because I said, I want to make sure my hair is combed, and I wanted to flat iron it. I know I like my curls, but something about when my hair is flat. Anyways, not important, but I had the flat iron and I was going through my hair, and then I heard my dad coming down the street, and it was a, it was a noise. It was an undescribable noise coming from him in the car, and so I I didn't think that it was him, but when the car stopped in the middle of the street, and I realized that it was him, and then he came in, and the words barely could have come from his mouth when he told my grandmother that he was in the morgue, in the morgue, like, in the what? The flat iron fell from my hands, and it fell on the floor, and I froze. I froze for at least an hour. I sat in that chair in freeze position because I didn't know how else to react. And so the information was pain in itself. The funeral was pain in itself, but it was the after effect of when everybody went back home, and when it was just you and the family, and there was not much faces to see anymore. It's how you go through that process of you close your eyes, you see his face. You walk downstairs where he used to stay, you would see his face, you would smell him. It was the reaction after, the devastation of it. Some people ask me how I go about talking with a smile on my face, and I said, well, after 11 years of rehearsing in the mirror, and teaching yourself how to say this, to relive the memory, it to relive the memory, it you have somehow it's going to come out naturally afterwards. But because of the person who he was, and because of the the brother who he was to me, instead of, he was not a sad person. And so, talking about him, I have to smile, I have to laugh, because that's the jovial, that was what came from his heart. And so I could only tell the story with a smile on my face, because I knew the person who he was, and that bond that we had. Yes, it was a devastating situation, and it was painful. It was painful, and we thought that after the funeral it was going to get better. Trust me, it got worse. It got harder until it got better. We went to counseling, we went to family counseling, we did single counseling, we did all the counseling we could have. I think I went through so many counselors, as going through this process. And in talking about that, we had to deal with other behind the issues of my personal life, and each personal life, in order to be able to go through and to get not rid the pain or get rid of the pain, but to be able to know how to cope and how to go through the situation. And so it wasn't an easy road. I mean, it's 11 years, and some days you still feel like crying, you still feel like hurting, because, like, you still in a shock that you have to live without this person. And then you have accomplishments and things that you're doing that you will be like, man, I wish this person was here to see it. And so the the process is a long journey. I was searching, and I was listening to some TED talks the other day about people that went through grief, and this one lady asked her life coach, how long will I have to experience this? And the life coach looked at her and said, well, sometimes it takes a lifetime. and losing somebody do take a lifetime to get over them. And a lifetime is, as long as you're walking this earth, you're going to remember that person. You're going to remember them because they live inside of you because of the bond that you shared with them as you were growing up.
Yes, and as you're talking about this, you, you know all the years, like you're playing back until that day when it happened, the weekend, and all of us being there and actually having to say goodbye. Not ever thinking that of our person it would have been that person you had to say goodbye to, but I want you to share. We were talking a little bit about this before we came on set, and I think it's going to be something very important for our viewers to see this morning. Losing someone, let's say this for an example purposes, you have someone that's sick, maybe your mom, your dad, your grandparents, and you've been visiting the hospital, and eventually the doctor says it's going to turn for the worse and you're going to lose them. I mean, losing that person to sickness is painful, but to a sense, there's a bit of comfort in knowing that you had that opportunity, one, to say goodbye to that person, and also you had time to prepare emotionally for it. But when that person is taken away from you suddenly, and not even just suddenly, but the way in which that person was removed from your life, I think also is very plays an instrumental role in the way in which you grieve. Because I'm here sitting thinking about it all over again, and I remember nothing ever came out of the case. There was no justice. There was nothing to kind of say, okay, you were able to close the case, and we felt justice, and we know that our brother didn't just die like that. It wasn't like it's just another dead person. But when a family, or when as you as an individual had to go through that, knowing the extent of the entire case and the death, and knowing up to this day that there was nothing that came out from it, I know to some degree it really pains your heart. And I want to just ask, if I may, how were you guys able to overcome that? How were you able to move past that? Because I know in our faith we always says justice belongs to the Lord, and trust me, when it actually happens to you, it strikes different, and I know you can attest to that. So I just want you to share with our viewers what that journey was like, and how were you able, I know it's only by the grace of God, but share with them how you were able to bring yourself from that point, going through the grieving process with all these different things regarding the case, and being able to be here with that smile on your face sharing about your brother.
First of all, justice belongs to the Lord was one of the most daggering words to say to somebody that is grieving. I mean, we understand Jesus is alive. We understand that Jesus saved. And we understand that Jesus understands everything. And he is the one who created everything. And he takes and I understand all of that. But for somebody that is grieving, the last thing you would want to say is, justice belongs to the Lord. Because I'm human. I'm feeling this. But until you understand, until it sits on your door, then you understand that justice, when you hear justice belongs to the Lord, it's not the most cutest thing to say to somebody that is grieving. And especially when your family member had been just, I mean, they were just, the police showed up at the door and they said, yes, this wanted Murillo has been in the morgue, dead on arrival from a gunshot, from several gunshot wounds. How do you process that? Where was the police at the point in time when he got shot, to the point in time when they found him? Where was the police? Where was the ambulance? Because I didn't hear any, because I was up that night at 12 o'clock when I heard those gunshots, and I was like, damn, somebody, family member just got it, not knowing that when I woke up, it would have been mine. and I didn't hear any sirens. I didn't hear any police vehicles. And thinking about it, why didn't I myself call and said, yo, there were so much gunshots just now, and I hear no officers or ambulance coming. So when you guys found him at 4, which was 4 hours later on in the drench, how do you tell me that justice belongs to the Lord? So in going to counseling and in finding, I guess, finding God for ourselves and understanding who He is in this situation, even though we understand that, yo, where were you at that time when he was being shot? Like, God, why didn't you do something in that point in time? So the situation is different, and I feel like it hurts even more because you have an understanding that that person is sick and they are going to eventually die. So you're ready, and your body and your emotions and your thoughts are being prepared to let go. And I'm not saying that it's easy still, but the process is different. When they're taken, they were not sick. Nothing was happening. Nothing was wrong with him. He was fine, healthy, and jovial before he went.
Okay, so sadly we're running out of time here, but before we leave, I just want you to share with our viewers. I know you're doing something very, I would say, commendable to honor your brother. Can you quickly share with us, with the little time that we have, of what that is and how you plan to honor your brother?
Okay, so I started couple, because there was this one family member of mine, and she was reading about the death of my brother, and she stumbled across an essay that I wrote, and because I entered a essay competition while I was in school, at school in Texas. I didn't want to, but my mom was driving me to write this essay about the loss of my brother, and so I did write the essay. I couldn't read it. I was in the scoring was weird, but I was a second class winner. And so Jana got to read it in front, and she got standing ovation for the essay. And so when she read that, she came to me and she was like, Aislinn, why don't you write a book? I was like, I know I always wanted to write a book, but on what, I didn't know. And so when she said that to me, a light bulb went on in my brain. I was like, maybe, oh, that's too much to go through, because you have to sit down and go through all that process again in order under to write this book. And so when she said that to me, I thought about it for a long period of time, and I said, you know what, I am going to write this book. And so I start writing. I am in the process of writing. I want to finish before the end of the year. And so I am in the process of writing this book in honoring the life of my brother, not because not what took place, but his life on a whole. And also in the book, I am going to teach people how to talk to you while you're grieving, because I could remember this one instant where this lady saw my mom. I think I mentioned it earlier when she said, um, your daughter, Miss D, how you do? I know your son just dead. Like, how do you say that to somebody when they're going through a grieving stage and the situation is so fresh? And so I want to be able to teach people how to talk to people while they're in that grieving process.
Yes, and so I want to commend Miss Aislinn for being brave. I know it's not going to be an easy journey. As you're writing, you'll have to reflect on all these instances. But I think it's very nice that you have chosen to honor your brother in this method. And I think it's going to help other persons, because other person who probably lost a brother or a loved one, when they're feeling like they're not able to explain, or they're not able to understand what they're feeling, reading a book, knowing that someone have went through it, and this is what it was like for them, this is how they overcome, I think is going to be very, very I would say very helpful in maneuvering themselves through the whole process. So we want to thank you so much, Miss Aislinn, for being with us this morning. We're
happy that you were able to share this experience with us. I know it probably was a bit difficult to, to think back on some of those things.
Sorry to interrupt. I have one last thought.
Sure.
I was reading something that says when the darker the night sky is, the brighter the star, and the deeper the pain, the closer God is. And that was a very comforting statement for me, So you could have it if you're a person that is going through grief, you could have that. Just to think that God, when your pain is deeper, that God is closer to you.
Yes, and definitely we have to end on that note because that is something very powerful that you just mentioned there. I know God did it for Miss Aislinn and her family, and I know that they can do it as well for you. So if you're going through a difficult time dealing with grief and loss, don't lose faith. Know that there is hope. Know that there are people that you can talk to, and know that there is that one special person that can help you to go through this process, and that is God. And that's what we wanted to share with you today. Grief is a part of life, and we, just as any health aspect, we need to take care of that part of our life to ensure that we're able to take care of ourselves and to understand what we're going through. So once again, we want to thank you for joining us here on Defining Your Health, and we'll see you next time. Do take care. Okay.